I am fully aware of how unbelievable the events I am about to describe to you are. From your point of view, I would not believe them either. I would think of them as a work of fiction from that of creative mind, but knowing what I have seen, I can arrive at no other conclusion. Think of me how you wish, insane or otherwise. All I ask is that you listen. The words I am now writing will probably be my last, for I believe I may have stumbled upon knowledge, either unknown to the world or kept a secret by those who have known the horror I have experienced, that will lead me to a most undesirable fate. I have always known I would be a writer. The encouragement of my wonderful mother encouraged me to pursue it. I was born a single child to a single mother. My imagination was my only solace during those times of childhood loneliness. Those experiences, however, were the seed that sprouted my love for writing. About 2 years after graduating, I moved out west like I had always planned. I landed in suburban Colorado. My few releases were selling well enough to support me for the foreseeable future, but I knew I had to get some work done if I wanted to survive. As I began to settle into my new surroundings, the loneliness I had mentioned before to take hold of me once again. I've never been a ladies' man, so my chances of finding a girlfriend in this small town populated with mostly tourists and retired couples looked unmistakably bleak. So, seeing no alternative, I moved down the pedestal to the next best thing. I found Sadie in a local dog shelter. She was a mangy mess of long golden fur, and mud caked her paws and ears. Her piercing gaze never left me as I pursued the scruffy animals in each cage. I continued to think about her even after my back was turned. I could feel her eyes on me at all times. As I made my way to her cage, I stared in amazement at the extreme intelligence I could see behind her brown, unblinking eyes. After a couple of minutes into staring competition, her pink tongue slid out over her teeth, and her tail began wagging. I knew I had to keep her. Our connection was instantaneous and deeper than I can describe. Over the next couple of months, Sadie's true intelligence turned from impressive to astonishing, and from astonishing to disturbing. She would pace around the house at night. Tables and household objects would be moved or tampered with some nights. She would stare at me from the wooden frame of my doorway. Her small silhouette, the only thing visible against the bathroom light, but somehow I knew her eyes were fixed in mine. After my mind had had enough, I began locking my room at night to block the view of her piercing eyes. That was where my troubles began. Small tapping noises, like the tapping of nails on the linoleum floor. After a few nights of delicately studying the rhythm of the noises, to my horror, I realized they could not be the footsteps of a canine. They were persons, walking around my house. With shaking hands, I pulled myself out from under my blankets. I tiptoed quietly as I could to my closet, retrieving a metal baseball bat. I crept quietly as possible on the creaking carpet. As my shivering hands grasped the cold doorknob, I turned it slowly. I swung open the door, but Sadie wasn't there. I breathed a sigh of relief and slowly my way down the stairs. Cool beads of sweat ran down my temple, tickling my cheeks. My hands tightened around the cold metal as the tapping continued. When I finally reached the bottom of the staircase, I turned my head around to face the kitchen as the footsteps continued. I tiptoed down the corridor to the kitchen. I laid the bat down on my right shoulder, and with careful and delicate movements, I peeked my head around the corner. My eyes widened, and I covered my mouth to withhold my scream. Before my bewildered eyes, I saw her. Her golden, long, hairy body was slouched over, her front legs curled like a giant praying mantis. Sadie was walking on 2 feet. I was frozen in fear, unable to move or tear my eyes away from this horrific scene. Her mouth and snout blurred and curled as she let out terrible grunts. It sounded like a man who was trying to speak while being strangled. Her sharp teeth flashed in the candlelight. Dread and confusion overtook me as I started back to behind the wall. Was she trying to speak? Oh God, was she trying to speak? I shut my eyes and shivered, too scared to move a muscle. Suddenly, a loud boom of metal against wood resounded throughout the quiet house. Without thinking, the bat had loosened itself from my sweating hands and fell to the ground. My eyes darted back to Sadie to see what she would do. Her head turned, her eyes being a tangled mop of hair peered into the hallway opening. She immediately dropped back on all fours, tail wagging. I ran back to my room, not caring what noise I made. I quickly shut the door and locked it, then locked myself in my bathroom for good measure. I sobbed as I heard scratching at my bedroom door. I slept in the bathtub all night and the next day, too scared to leave. After many hours, and knowing I couldn't stay there indefinitely, I slowly unlocked the bathroom door. I crept quietly down the stairs once again, trying my best not to make a noise. I never wanted to see her again. I knew I would never forget her stare as long as I lived. I crept to the kitchen to make a break for the front door. I sighed as I realized she wasn't in the kitchen. I ran to the front door and I scrambled to unlock it. Suddenly, behind me, I heard a low snarl. My head slowly turned around. To my absolute horror, she was standing in the doorway, licking her long, jagged teeth, her face jittering and convulsed. She began speaking once again. Hungry. My hands, shaking, tried to turn the lock, but she was too fast. In an instant, she was on top of me. Her long, jagged teeth sunk deep into my forearm. The pain was so indescribable, sending shockwaves up and down my arm into my body. I began to sob as she tore her flesh from my arm, growling and snarling. Blood flew from her foaming mouth as she dug deeper. Out of fear and desperation, I began to dig at her left eye. I dug and scratched, blood pouring from the wound onto my fingers like a fountain. It felt squishy and wet like digging into a cup of watery jello. I pulled it out and threw it away onto the hardwood floor. She let go, staggered back, moaning and howling in pain. I staggered back into the hallway, retrieving my bat. Blood covered the floors and my hands. With tears filling in my eyes, I began laying blows down onto her head. With each blow, her howls became quieter. Teeth, flesh, and blood sprayed from the tattered corpse until all the remains of her head was a scattered, mushy pile of teeth and flesh. I dropped to my knees and sobbed bitterly on the floor for what seemed like hours. It was hours before I called an ambulance. I spent a week in the hospital. I never told the doctors the truth about how I got the injury because they would only laugh. I merely told them my dog bit me. They encouraged me to receive a shot for rabies. I complied. I can say until I'm blue in the face how true this story is, but that won't convince you. I'm telling the story not to relieve my soul of the burden of my tale, but to simply share the truth. I will carry this horror and all its unanswered questions for the rest of my life. I still don't know the facts, and I know that the thirst for answers will never be quenched. However, I do know one thing. Ever since it happened, all the dogs I've seen won't stop staring.